Many people believe you do not need an antivirus if you use Linux. I am not going to start that debate here. However, in my opinion, it is always better to have one and not need it, than to need one and not have it. In this tutorial we are going to show you how to install, configure, and scan for viruses on Linux with ClamAV. ClamAV is a fully open-source anti-malware toolkit. It is available for almost any operating system, including Windows. Let's get started. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel and hit the bell icon to be notified of new videos. Let's start by installing ClamAV and its GUI interface ClamTk. This is easily accomplished through your package manager. We are using Fedora in this example, but it should be very similar on Ubuntu using apt. To install ClamAV and its GUI interface on RPM-based systems like Fedora, simply use DNF and specify the packages like so. If you prefer to install applications from the GUI, you can use the GNOME Software Center. Simply open the Software Center by hitting the super key and search for software. Select the software icon to open the application. Now that Software Center is open, hit the search feature on the top left and enter ClamTk. Simply click the ClamTk icon to install it. ClamAV and all other dependencies will be automatically installed. It is very important to update the virus definition database once the packages are installed. FreshClam is a tool specifically designed for this task. Simply calling it on the command line will update the database. It takes a few seconds, but here you can see that the virus signature database has been updated. You can also update the virus database using the GUI. Go into your applications and launch ClamTk. Once it's open, simply click the Update button. The ClamAV team says they update the virus signature database approximately twice a day. If you do not update the signatures, you can be vulnerable to new malware and zero-day exploits. The easiest way to keep the signatures updated is to use the ClamAV FreshClam service. Let's start the service and enable it at boot. To start the service, we can use systemctl start command just like any other service. Now we use systemctl to enable the service so it starts on boot. Alternatively, you can set FreshClam to run whenever you like as a cron job. Now that we have a basic install of ClamAV, ClamTk, and the virus definition signatures, it's time to run our first scan. You can run a scan from either the command line or the GUI. I much prefer running the scan from the command line. You get much more feedback and for some reason it seems to run more efficiently. However, we will show you how to scan for viruses using the command line and the GUI. ClamAV comes with a command line scanning tool called ClamScan. If you want to scan a single file, simply pass it as an argument to the ClamScan utility. Once the scan completes, you will be presented with a scan summary that provides important information. In this case, the file was clean. Let's download a test virus from icar.org and run a scan against it. This will help familiarize ourselves with what to expect if there is a virus detected. Once the file is downloaded, we simply pass the name as an argument to ClamScan and see what happens. As you can see, ClamScan now shows a found message instead of the OK message. It also says there is one infected file in the scan summary. No action was taken against the file because we did not specify it on the command line. In a few moments we will discuss taking actions against infected files. Scanning directories with ClamScan is very intuitive. Simply pass the directory as an argument just like you did with the file. Here is an example of scanning the pictures directory. As you can see in the summary, we now scanned one directory which contained 31 files. However, I have a folder containing some vacation photos inside the pictures directory. In order to scan a directory and all of its subdirectories, we need to pass the recursive flag. Let's try the same command again, but this time pass the -R option telling ClamScan to scan into all directories. Now the summary shows that we scanned 2 directories and 42 files. This is because the recursive options told it to look into all subdirectories as well. With this basic knowledge, we can now run a simple scan on our entire home directory. This is a good practice since most users download and save files in this location. Here we are using the -I option to limit the output to only infected files. Here is the summary output of the first recursive scan on my home directory. As you can see, we scanned 3,213 directories and 62,355 files. Of course, it found one infected file because we downloaded the test virus for an earlier example. Scanning a file using ClamTk is a very familiar experience. Simply open the GUI and click the Scan a File option. Once the dialog box opens, navigate to the file, select it, and click OK. Once the scan completes, you will be shown a similar summary page. In this case, it simply says no threats found. To scan a directory, select the Scan a Directory option. By default, this option will scan recursively, meaning it will scan the directory and all the subdirectories. This is the opposite behavior of the command line utility. Now we should be fairly comfortable with kicking off a virus scan. But what do we do if we find an infected file? We basically have 3 options. You can move the file into a directory of your choice, copy the file somewhere for further analysis, or remove the file. Before proceeding, I feel it necessary to explain that it is very important to understand the risks involved with working with infected files. We cannot go into great detail here because that alone is a major subject. Any action taken can have adverse effects. In our opinion, moving a file into a quarantine directory, renaming it, and ensuring it does not have execute permissions is safest for inexperienced users. If you do not feel comfortable making these decisions, ask someone for help. Here we will cover some basic examples of each action. To copy the infected file to another directory, we will use the copy option. Since this is a copy operation, the infected file will now exist in 2 locations. Be careful. As you can see, the file was copied to the specified directory and renamed to have a different file extension. In this example, we use the Move option to move infected files to another location. Preferably this would be a quarantine directory. You can see ClamScan moved one file into the specified quarantine directory. Here we use the Remove option to delete any infected files. Typically, removing files from your home directory is safe. I still recommend running a scan and then taking manual action against infected files for inexperienced users. Now let's look at taking these same actions in the GUI. When a scan initiated with the ClamTk GUI completes, you will be met with a summary screen. If no infected files were found, it will notify you and the only option presented is to close the summary screen. However, if it does find an infected file, you will be presented with 3 options. The quarantine option will move the file into the default ClamTk quarantine folder and rename it. The delete option will simply delete the file. Clicking on the analysis option will allow you to submit the file to VirusTotal. If the file has been previously submitted, you will be presented with information from other antivirus vendors. This will allow you to make a more informed decision on how to act on this file. This article was not written to cover all options or configurations. It was written as a basic ClamAV primer to help the average Linux user get started. However, it is important to know that there are more advanced configurations. You can run ClamAV as a daemon, configure on-access scans, and use options and regular expressions to narrow down your scan. Let us know in the comments if you liked this article and would like to see another tutorial on advanced ClamAV configurations. Also, please remember to subscribe and hit the bell icon to be notified when new videos are posted.